Hello, my name is Robert Burnett, and today I'm going to give an informative speech on how to build a PC. Before we get started, let's make sure that we have all the parts necessary to complete the build. The parts include a CPU processor, a CPU fan, RAM sticks, motherboard, hard drive, power supply, graphics card, as well as the computer case. The only tools that we need to actually build the PC are a Phillips head screwdriver and a flathead screwdriver. First, let's begin by taking the motherboard, CPU processor, CPU fan, and RAM outside of their packaging. First, we're going to take the black cap off of the motherboard. Next, we're going to unhinge the lever and hooking mechanism and lift it all the way open. Next, we're going to grab the CPU processor by its sides, ensuring not to touch any of the golden contact pins or the chip on top of the CPU. Locate the triangles to the bottom left-hand corner of the CPU, as well as the bottom left-hand corner of the motherboard slot for the CPU. Simply place the CPU in the slot, hook the lever down to ensure that it latches and locks into place. Next, we're going to install the CPU fan. Take the fan and place it on top of the CPU. Then take the four corners of the CPU fan and push them firmly into the motherboard until you hear them click in place. Next, take the cable from the CPU fan and plug it into the motherboard slot labeled CPU_fan 1. Now that we have the motherboard prepared, let's install it inside of the computer case. According to Instructables, a website that specializes in do-it-yourself projects, the case should have come with a bag of screws to install your motherboard. Identify the correct screws and line up the motherboard inside of the case using the standoffs. Simply screw the screws into the standoff to securely lock the motherboard in place. Next, we'll be installing the power supply. Mount the power supply inside the case and use the four screws provided to securely lock it in place. Next, we'll be installing the hard drive. Slide the hard drive all the way into a hard drive bay until you hear it lock into place. Finally, we'll be installing the graphics card. Locate the PCIe slot on the motherboard and simply push firmly the graphics card into the slot until you hear it lock in place. Then, use the two screws provided from the case to securely lock it to the outside of the case. Now that everything is installed, it's time to connect the power cables. First, take the 24-pin connector and plug it to the right side of the motherboard. Then, we'll take the 8-pin connector and plug it into the top left-hand corner of the motherboard. Next, we'll take the 6 or 8-pin connector and plug it into the graphics card. It will be either 6 or 8 pin depending on the type of graphics card that you have. Next, we'll take the SATA cables provided by the motherboard manufacturer as well as from the power supply and plug them into the hard drive. Finally, we'll plug in the cables from the case into the motherboard. Please refer to your motherboard manual onto how to plug in the cables, as they are different for every manufacturer. Take a few moments to use the included cable ties and secure the cables in the case. According to Tech Radar, an online publication focused on technology, this will keep internal temperatures low and ensure that your PC looks great. If you have followed all these steps correctly, congratulations, and you should now have a completed PC build. Simply take the USB drive with your operating system, plug it into the USB port, and boot from USB in your BIOS. Follow the on-screen instructions, and very soon you will be looking at the desktop of your newly built PC. Thank you.